The emotional work in the emotional world is not necessarily something that many of us want to delve into. It is not always fun, it's not always exciting, and a lot of the times it is really painful and overwhelming. And unfortunately, many of us have been conditioned to not trust our emotion, to be frustrated that we have emotions, to judge our emotions, and to suppress them because of all the things I just mentioned. We may experience trauma or certain situations that make us feel like we are too much or that we are a burden if we have big, intense emotions or even any type of emotional reaction. If we've experienced something that has made us feel shameful of the things that we feel, our body learns this. And what our body believes over time through repeated experiences is that it is not safe or okay or valid to feel whatever the emotion. Sadness, grief, anger, shame, envy, jealousy, anything you can imagine. Anything that you have felt before and wished that you didn't feel. We are taught this, whether it's overtly or it's subtly. So many of us become disconnected to ourself and our emotions because it doesn't feel safe. And we then start to judge ourselves. And then when we do experience emotions or have triggering situations that bring up uncomfortable emotions, rather than feeling comfortable with sitting with them and feeling them and talking about them, we judge ourselves and we get frustrated with ourselves for the fact that they even are there, for the fact that they exist. And this is really sad because it's in all of us. In some way, shape or form, it's in all of us to have some sort of distaste or distrust or dislike for our emotions. And then this, in conjunction with the lack of safety to feel, is you now have fear and you now have shame. And then it just keeps going up. You abandon yourself because of your emotions. You abandon yourself because that's what you've been taught to do, to abandon your emotions. You've been taught that they're wrong and that they're a burden and that it's not okay for you or for them to exist as they are naturally designed to. And when this happens, your body over time shows you that this is not good. To put it simply, not good. To give you an example, I grew up with a very traumatizing childhood and I did not feel safe to feel or express my emotions, no matter the emotion. And I suppressed a lot of things, including anger. I believed that anger was unsafe to feel or to be around, and I suppressed it, more so than I suppressed my grief. But because I suppressed so much anger and all the other emotions, and then I hated myself and judged myself when I did feel things, because I know that I'm a sensitive person, my body paid the cost for it. And when I was 19, they found a tumor on my liver, and it was a rare type of cancer. And between the ages of 19 and 23, I have been healing from that cancer. And if you know anything about the energetics of the body, or if you don't, that's fine. But in Chinese medicine, the liver is responsible for processing the emotion anger. It is very funny because that is one emotion that I was terrified of and judged myself for. And because I judged myself so much for it, because I suppressed it so much and I had no idea, none at all, how to feel or process anger, which is a natural human emotion, and it's actually a sign and a signal for boundaries being overstepped so that we can respond and correct those boundaries and find safety again. Because I had no idea how to do that within myself, because I'd only been shown how bad anger could be and how violent and how aggressive it is and how unsafe it is. I got liver cancer. Out of all the different types of ailments and sicknesses, I got liver cancer because that was the one emotion that I struggled with the most. Now, explaining that, I hope you can understand just how important it is for us to feel and know how to safely process our emotions. And it doesn't sound like fun, I know. It wasn't fun, especially because I had so much that was suppressed. There was a lot for my body to process and feel and find safety doing. Now, for a long time, when I first was diagnosed with this, I knew that there was some work to be done. I knew that this was not okay. And I did start the feeling journey. I did start practicing how to feel. I did start introducing safety into my body. I no longer lived at home, and I was practicing all the different holistic modalities you can think of. I was meditating, I was working with kinesiology, I was doing trauma counseling, I was working with energy, I was doing Reiki, all of the things. I was learning how to feel safe again in my body, and for my emotions just learn how to be felt and released. And I thought that that was enough. I thought it would be enough to identify, feel, and release my emotions. And I did that for a few years until I got to a point when I realized that my health was still not getting better, and there was still inflammation in my body still struggled with certain emotions. I still judged myself. I still wanted to shut down when things got too much. There was still some struggles going on, but I had gotten better with feeling, and I had gotten better with identifying, which I never used to be able to do. It got to a point when I realized that my life was still not changing, and I still wasn't as healthy as I wanted to be, and I still had liver cancer, was that I had to go deeper. That's what I thought. And it was through so many different experiences and so many different lessons that I came to another realization of healing anything isn't just about feeling and releasing and being aware. Those things are amazing, and those things are the backbone, the foundation. But because I experienced such intense trauma and conditioning that made me believe certain things about myself, even though I was releasing the emotions, the patterns were still there, the beliefs were still there, and the conditioning was still present within me. So even though I was releasing, I was still attracting the same people, the same situations, the same environment that would keep me in the loop of judging myself, shaming myself, hating myself, all the things that still inflamed my liver and still kept the other organs of my body and kept other parts of my life still out of balance and not fully processed and integrated of how I wanted to respond to life and how I wanted to interact and connect with my world. So this is where I'm trying to say that the feeling and releasing work is very important, but you cannot complete an emotional cycle without integration of what you learn and what you receive wisdom from through this feeling and releasing process. And that's when it hit me. And about 3 years ago, I had this download come through called the 5 Pillars of Everything. And this explained to me this operational system of everything, of the universe, of cyclical living, of how us as humans and energy in the physical world, how it all connects and operates together. And it's through these kinds of cycles. The first pillar is existence. Then we have experience, expansion, evolution, and enlightenment. Now, this sounds very spiritual, very woo, and although it definitely can be on one spectrum, I then had to live this out for the past 3 years, moving from just the spiritual knowing of what those pillars meant to me, but I had to actually live and embody the teachings on a physical, emotional, mental level. It couldn't just stay up here. Because again, there was a need for integration of new behavioral responses, new beliefs, a new system that wouldn't keep repeating the same loops again and again and again. So although I had improved and although I had learnt what my body never felt safe to do, it still didn't know how to actually leave those emotional cycles behind where I would stay stuck in the depths and not be able to evolve and transform and become a version of myself that felt capable, that felt free, that felt confident and trusting, and was then able to actively be that in all the other things I wanted to do with my life. And that's where the pillars come into this. And that's why I created my framework, Path of Pain to Power. Because Path of Pain to Power uses the first 4 pillars as a natural feeling and releasing and transformational process for the emotions. With this framework, we go through acceptance, which aligns with the existence pillar. Then we move into feeling and experiencing the emotions, which goes into the experience pillar. And then we move into understanding, increasing awareness, seeing patterns, which taps into the expansion pillar. And then the 4th and the final one in this framework is the evolution pillar, where we make conscious choices to respond differently to emotional or triggering situations or any kind of situation in our life where we would used to respond one way and we now want to respond this way. Now, the reason this is so important to have, and the reason we can't just stay stuck in the feeling and releasing cycle, is because that is a continuous loop when we are meant to spiral. We are meant to move through cycles. We're not meant to stay in the same cycle for too long. If we stay in the same cycle for too long, our body still suffers the cost with anything. Or it'll be your relationships, or it'll be your external world, or things will continue to crumble because there hasn't been an end to the loop that you have done enough of now. The point of those cycles is to experience it as many times as needed for you to fully integrate and learn the wisdom and take that into your next level of being and doing. And this is evolution. This is the shift from being stuck in the experience expansion loop into the next cycle, which is where we evolve. We're always going to exist in cycles. That is the way that everything has been designed, as far as I've experienced and witnessed myself, and then a lot of people in my life as well. But in order to evolve anything, there are 3 things that we need. And these 3 things come from the first 3 pillars, and they are then embodied deeply in the 4th pillar. Now, this isn't something that you'll do once and be done with it. This is something that you will do again and again and again. And the time in which you move through these pillars is entirely up to you and your timing. It's not anything that is a race. It is very, very personal. And this 4th pillar of evolution, and the way that it relates to Path of Pain to Power, this emotional processing and transformational framework, is we need the desire to change, the willingness to change, and consistent conscious choices of change. Those are the main 3 things that you need to evolve from any cycle. The bridge that gets you there is the awareness of everything that's in your container, everything that's in your level of expansion, where you are currently at. In this expanded container, you see all of your patterns, all of your experiences, all of your re-experiences, everything that has made you who you are up until this current moment, every moment that you tap into yourself. And when we go through the releasing part, which is experience, we tap into emotional clarity. And we see all of this. And when we see all of this and feel all of this, we also have the capacity to tap into what it is that we want. We see our patterns, we're aware of them, we realize we no longer want them. And then in that understanding and that recognition of, I don't want this anymore, but I have accepted that I have it, and I've experienced all that it entails, and I'm aware of the patterns, I am now aware of what I do want. And this is the bridge that takes us into evolution, where we desire change, we are willing to do it and make it happen and become the version of ourselves that we want to become, or embody the responses that we need that is different to what we have known and continue to experience and repeat. And consistently and consciously making those choices until it becomes natural, until it becomes a part of who you are, until you are embodied, and all of that is an afterthought, and you don't have to choose to do it. It just is. It just exists, and then you return to existence. I hope I've explained that okay for now. There's a lot more in Path of Pain to Power, but I want to quickly explain why this is important, because you're probably hearing all of this and you're wondering, well, how does this relate to me? How is it actually going to help me? Like I said, when you stay in the identification and the acceptance and the feeling loop, and you don't recognize what you no longer want, and then what you do want, and then take steps towards that, it's never going to change. It's never going to change. It may take a very long time, but even then, difference isn't needed, because your body and your emotions and your mind only knows what it knows. So if you are not willing to introduce new responses and show your body what else is available to you and what else you are capable of, then you will never feel or be able to change and be embodied in that change. That's why it's consistent conscious choices, because you can't just do it once. Because you learned to be who you are now through repetition, through constantly experiencing the same cycles and constantly experiencing the same beliefs and seeing them reflected back at you again and responding the same way every single time. And that is why in my own healing journey, the only way that I healed from my cancer, my liver cancer, was to teach myself and to show myself and actively allow myself to be angry. It might sound crazy, because you might think that anger is not safe either. Maybe you have your own issues with anger, but anger is a natural human emotion. Everything you feel is normal. It is natural. The more that you allow yourself to feel and move through what is natural to you without constantly attaching to it and constantly living in the same stories that your mind tells you, and you let yourself release it and you understand why it's there, you can make a different decision, and you can choose what you want when you realize what exists and what you no longer want. I no longer wanted to be scared of my anger. I no longer wanted my body to be unhealthy. I no longer wanted to be imbalanced. I no longer wanted to be this small, people-pleasing, scared version of myself who was too afraid to express her boundaries. And I learned that after 20 years of living. And I'm still practicing it every single day, because my body is still learning and trusting that this is safe and that this is okay and that this is the new normal. And that's why frameworks are important, because it is easy to get stuck in the feeling and the depths, and then to release and then to feel better, because emotional clarity only ever comes after emotional release. Understanding of the fullest ofness of your emotion only comes after emotional feeling, movement, and release. Because a lot of the time when we try to understand our emotions before we feel them, we disrupt them. Because logic and analysis naturally arrives after we do the first few things of accepting and feeling and releasing. If you allow yourself to be supported by a framework that takes you through the steps and holds you whilst you learn to hold yourself towards feeling capable and free and no longer like an emotional burden and connected to your emotions, you realize, and you will realize, that this whole time that you've been hating on your emotions, that you've been intellectualizing them, that you've been avoiding and suppressing them, is because you want to be free to be yourself. but you don't know what that means. And that sounds scary. And so you think what that is to be free of the things that are so natural to you as a human. This emotional work isn't about freeing yourself from your emotions. It is about finding freedom within yourself to feel and to still be empowered and to still be able to choose who you want to be, because you are capable of feeling and releasing and processing and being aware and knowing that you aren't your emotions, but they are a natural part of you where you can learn more of you from. But if you don't give them the space to exist, if you don't give them the freedom to move throughout yourself, through your being like they are naturally designed to, then you will never feel free to be yourself, to be authentic, to live a life that you want to live. You may get sick, or you may already be noticing that there's imbalances going on because your emotions are an essential part of you, and they deserve to be free, just like you do. They deserve to exist the way that they were designed to. And in my experience, again and again and again, I have learned that the process is existence, experiencing them, processing and understanding your expansion and where you are at and all that you entail, and being able to choose from the clarity that comes when you let what exists exist. You cannot remove them. You cannot keep shoving them down without facing consequences later. You cannot ignore what exists. Well, you can, but it doesn't mean it doesn't. Just because you close your eyes doesn't mean it's not there. Just because you push it down, it doesn't mean it's not going to just be gone. Your emotions are searching for freedom just as much as you are. And if this is making sense, and if this is clicking, and if you realize that you need some sort of framework that's going to hold you whilst you learn to hold yourself, from being stuck in those cycles to feeling empowered and to feeling capable, then this is for you.